Hello, this is from Book 1 of the Whidbey Island Tales, and it's called The Great Adventures of a Common Walking Tree. It may not sound so great because, after all, it is a common walking tree, but you may be surprised. All right, so I'm going to read Chapter 1 since Amazon has put up much of Chapter 1 and on their site for selling my book. Okay, so let's look at Chapter 1, A Walking Tree. And I'm just going to read like the first 10 or 11 pages. Now, Chapter 1, A Walking Tree, if you look at the picture, there's a young walking tree. He's walking away from home. He's walking away from his forest. The old trees are shocked and surprised. No tree ever walked away from home. And this young tree has a big smile on his face as he looks back, and he's about to turn and go on his way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and begin reading it, and you'll see who the author is. It should come as no surprise, of course, that this Seed Through Tree story was written from a tree's point of view, for only a tree would know certain things of a tree's life. Also, for obvious reasons, a tree could never tell a story from any other point of view, even if a tree ever wished to. In addition, not only is any tree story quite easy to read, but it's also, of course, the most fruitful. And so this is a tree story as told by a tree. Now, if by some miracle our planter has made any non-trees with the ability to read, I'm sure that he's also given them at least a bit of tree sense, certainly enough to understand a tree story such as this. We will now leave the early sprouting of this tree tale by mentioning those two proverbs popular among well-read trees. Every good tale begins with a seed, and home's the place you'd never leave, even if you ever could. In my beginning, there was utter darkness, as far back as I can remember, and there was such silence for some time, and this before I even learned of time. But then I found my seed self stretching and stretching, with all these noisy, crackling sounds all around me. No, I was wrong. The sounds were me. I, whose seed ever I was being pulled both downward and upward at the same time, nearly pulled apart, and this before even finding out who I was. In hindsight, I know now that while the darkness of the earth was pulling at my roots, the bright light above was pulling at my growing crown. What will become of me, whoever me is? This was my first real seed thought. But suddenly, there were these huge snappings, cracklings, poppings, rumblings, and thunderings, and the whole blue sky was suddenly bursting apart in every direction while falling at the same time, falling down on me. Or was I flying upward? I didn't yet know. Now the bright, empty sky was less empty, being all around me, as well as up above. I suddenly noticed that this bright light was not only everywhere about me, but it was me. Or was it in me? It was changing me, making me its home within my broken shell. Making its home within my broken shell. Who was I? I still didn't know. I still didn't know whether I should know. And I still didn't know whether I should know. Oh, my seedling days were so confusing. But then I did finally ask my seedling self, who is me? And yes, this was my first real seedling thought. I was now a seedling, whose seedling ever I was. Every tree in the neighborhood was now coming into view. How strange! And then my whole new bright world began to shrink and to shrink, smaller and smaller, as suddenly as it had all appeared, the new earth below becoming more and more distant, farther and farther away from a growing sapling's view. My huge neighbors, I later learned who they were, were becoming a little less and less like the gigantic giants that they had been at first. I was climbing higher and higher toward that distant blue sky. And yet, at the same time, I somehow knew that I was also drilling down deep into the dark earth. I couldn't see it, but I could sense it. And saplings, as you know, have very good senses. Yes, I had the usual growing pains, but that was okay for a growing sapling, for I just kept reaching upward, towering farther above the fading earth, or so was my tiny sapling thought. I was aiming higher and higher for a blue sky of light. My first real sapling thought, I'm home. When did I first notice that I was very different from my neighbors? It was some time later that I began to compare my plain, simple tree self to my lofty, fully leaf-crowned neighbors. I could have been one of their tiny, thin sticks stuck in the mud. I held on to my poor, flattened crown, while all my neighborly giants each wore their proud, full-leafed crowns way up high in the sky. Poor sapling me. I had such a hard time growing up there. I soon learned that it was these giant crowns of my neighborhood that were frightening away the life-giving light I so longed for. How did I like home, where I was standing daily in the great dark shadows of giants? Of course, I learned this valued proverb early in life. Home's the place you never leave, even if you ever could. Though this was home, some trees began whispering, among them tree selves, he's too different. Let me explain how different I became besides having the simple flat crown and thin trunk. You see, while their roots were mostly in the darkness of the earth, as they should be, of course, many of mine were reaching downward from much further above the earth. Most of their roots were hidden, but most of mine were in full view. We all guessed that they had many roots hidden under the earth. We have all seen some unfortunate neighbor fall over for some reason, perhaps because of a storm, leaving all their roots high up in the air to dry. Roots were meant to be hidden, they often reminded me. But what could I do? I didn't want to be different. And so, yes, being so different was embarrassing. Unfortunately, a poor old neighbor did fall over some time later, falling over right on top of me. I guess he had lost his grip in the dark earth and just toppled over, knocking me over with him. But while he was sadly a lost, soon-to-dry tree now, having no hope for survival, I suddenly found my tree self just picking up my roots and walking away from my birthplace, away from home. Oh, every tree was in such shock, including me. You see, my roots started extending further out from my trunk, pulled me out from under that poor old neighbor, and then lifted me right up facing the sky again. Here I was now, standing some distance from my home. I had just walked away from where I was trapped. How happy I was! But no, not my neighbors. They had even more questions about me after that. I could hear them whispering even more among them tree selves. What were they saying? Did I hear ghost? Did they think I was a ghost? I think they did, but I wasn't. I was still a living tree. It's just that now I could walk. I was a walking tree. I began to hear other whisperings among neighbors at that time. I heard something like, I hear they dropped him off at night. And there were 2 of them, I hear. What could this gossip mean? Were they talking about me? I thought they were, and so I asked our forest giant who stood next to me, Granddaddy, how did I get here? Grandson, now I can tell you how you got here. Every tree knows that 2 of some kind left you here among us at night. Of what kind they were, no tree knows, for no tree knows who saw those 2. And so where they came from and where they went, no tree here knows this either. Grandson, this is your home. And home's the place you'd never leave, even if you ever could. Grandson, you have been with us since you were just a tiny seed. We are your family. Yes, Granddaddy. Thank you, Granddaddy. I knew that Granddaddy told me all that he knew. This was home. Now, soon after that, I saw my first wonder of the skies. I shouted, "Look, Granddaddy, clouds of flowers." They were right up there above us. There were bright and colorful clouds of flying flowers way up high in the sky. Oh, my grandson, learn these words. First, seeing clouds of flowers flying about is welcoming a season beginning to sprout. Oh, Granddaddy, what does that mean? Grandson, your season of new beginnings is sprouting. Welcome it. Yes, Granddaddy. But then something began happening to me, and nothing after that was the same. As if my differences weren't bad enough, I also began to have strange dreams at night. I soon tried to keep them to my tree self the best I could, but I'm not very good at that. Here are the talks about my dreams. Why are you looking so downcast, grandson? I had a dream, Granddaddy. Tell me. Well, I was up on the heights, up above our forest, and there were 3 of me. I could see me 3 clearly, 1, 2, 3. And then there were walking grass seeds walking up to me 3, planting themselves into the earth. They grew up tall and waved goodbye. Last, we 3 came down from the heights, happily walking home. What do you think, Granddaddy? No tree has foolish dreams like this. On the heights? How will you become taller than me, Granddaddy of trees? Walking grass seeds and walking trees? Seeds and trees don't walk. Your branches aren't much taller than your roots, grandson. I then decided not to have any more dreams, but still there was another one. Why this dead wood look, grandson? Well, it's not important, really. Another dream? Tell me. Well, this time I was walking with many of me. They or me were all around me. First, we all had much fruit. But next, I was trying to pull my tree self away from many of me, while they were disappearing into thin gray earth crawlers. I finally pulled free and walked up toward the heights. Weren't the 3 of you enough in your first dream? And now you must have many of you? What kind of dream is this, grandson? Trees disappearing into earth crawlers never happens. And again, you're walking the heights above your Granddaddy? No more of these dreams. Yes, Granddaddy. But yes, there was a third one. Why looking down? Another dream? Tell it to me, grandson. Well, yes. Well, I was walking through many clearings and forests. Then I saw some trees with no faces, and some trees walked straight, while others walked in circles. Granddaddy, I don't understand why I have these dreams. What could this one mean, Granddaddy? What crazy dream? Mean? It means nothing. Treeberish. Nothing but silly treeberish. Clearings and forests? What's a clearing? Trees walking again? Trees don't walk. I knew when I saw you rising up as a seedling that you were too different. But Granddaddy, you asked me to tell you. A little later, the whisperings among my neighbors became like echoing thunder. Somehow my dreams had become common knowledge, and no tree, of course, liked what they heard of my lofty dreams. After all, what tree would like a tiny tree walking on the heights over their crown? Granddad could stand the noisy rumblings no longer. So Granddad finally burst. What trouble your dreams have brought us, grandson. Well, that's as far as I'm going to read. And I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed writing it. I enjoy reading it and hearing it, of course. And if you're interested, you can buy it on Amazon, and it's in the Whidbey Island Tales series. And this is book 1. It's called The Great Adventures of a Common Walking Tree. All right, thank you for listening, and see you around.